Today we're covering 8th grade, Chapter 3, Lesson 4, Equations in y equals mx form. This has to do with proportional relationships, proportional linear relationships. Remember, linear means that the graph is a straight line. Well, a linear relationship is proportional when the ratio of y to x is a constant m, and m stands for slope. So let's look at example 1. A cyclist can ride 3 miles in 0.25 hour. The distance ridden in miles y and the time in hours x are in a proportional linear relationship. The situation can be represented by y equals 12 times x. Graph the equation and determine and interpret the slope. So the formula they gave us is y equals 12 times x. So I'm just going to plug in some different numbers. Start with 0. So if I plug in a 0, it would be 12 times 0, which is 0. Now, would I want to plug in any negative numbers for x? No, I probably would not want to, because it's talking about distance and time, and those are not things that can be negative. So if I plug in 2 hours, it would be 12 times 2, which is 24. And I'm just picking a random number to plug in. It could have been anything. So the next one will be 12 times 5, which is 60. And we're going to go ahead and put them in this graph over here. So my x's can count by ones, but the y-axis probably needs to count by maybe 12s. So this first line would be 12, and then 24, 36, 48, and 60. And the first coordinate that I had was 0, 0, so that's right there. The next one went over 2 and up to 24, and then to the right 5 and up to 60. And as you can see, it made a straight line. So yes, it is linear. So we're going to interpret the slope. The slope is similar to unit rate. And as you can see, looking at the graph, if I go over 1, it would go up to 12. So that means the cyclist can ride 12 miles per hour, because the slope was 12, or 12 miles per hour. Example 2. The average cat's heart beats 60 times in 30 seconds. The number of heartbeats, y, and the time in seconds, x, are in a proportional linear relationship. This situation can be represented by y equals 2x. We're going to graph the equation in the coordinate plane. And you can make yourself a little chart, xy chart. If I plug in 1, it would be 2 times 1, which would be 2. If I plugged in 5, it would be 5 times 2, which is 10. And I suggest always plugging in 0. So 0 times 2 would be 0. So it does go through the origin. I'm going to put 0, 0 there. then go over 1 and up to 2, and then over 5 and up to 10. And again, it made a straight line and it went through the origin. My line's not so straight. So we're going to determine and interpret the slope. The slope was 2. You can find the slope. It's usually what you're multiplying times x. And that means the cat's heart beats 2 times every second. And so the unit rate, if I go over 1, I went up to 2. So the unit rate is the same. Let's look at some of the questions that you're supposed to do today. So you're mostly going to be looking at graphs, and you're going to be finding the slope, and then you're going to find the unit rate. And then a couple of the questions ask, what does 0, 0 represent? And yes, I know it's the origin, but what does the origin represent for that graph? So let's look here at this first one. To find the slope, remember for a graph, you do the change of y over the change of x, so you can find a couple of points and subtract your y's and subtract the x's. And then when you're trying to find the unit rate, remember that's where you go to 1 and see what it is. And unit rate means there's going to be words, so it'll be something miles per hour for this one, because it's the y word per the x word. So then what would 0, 0 represent? Well, that's 0 miles in 0 hours. And it's basically the same thing for number 2. You're going to be answering what's the slope, what's the unit rate, and what does 0, 0 represent. For this last one, you're just really going to be looking for the slope. And also the unit rate, which you might start to realize is very similar. And then y, explain how do you know this is proportional? And you can use a graph and kind of figure it out. If you're using it online, you'll see the graph is already done for you. And you can tell me, how do you know something is proportional?